Hey everyone, can you guys hear me okay? It's been a long time since I've done a YouTube live, so let me know if you can hear me okay. It's not too laggy. We will get started pretty soon. Hey everyone, hello, hello. Welcome in. Awesome. We'll get started in probably, we'll give it about another minute or so before we get started. Let people settle in, work out any tech issues if there are any. While we're waiting, let me know where are you tuning in from? What time is it there for you? Where are you from? It is for me 10 a.m. here in New Zealand. Okay, so we've got all sorts of uh, times now. I usually say like 3 a.m. is like the worst time. If you are awake at 3 a.m., it means either you woke up way too early or you're going to sleep way too late. Like 3 a.m. is like the most unacceptable time to be awake. So I'm seeing some people that are here at 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m. So special shout out to you guys. Appreciate the dedication. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll get started pretty soon. Yeah, people recently have been leaving comments to drop my skincare routine. And so there's two things I want to say about that, which is number one, I have been trying to focus on my skincare because when I started recording myself in 4K, I realized that my skin looks dry as. So I started going heavy on the skincare. But you know what made the biggest difference? This is the secret that big skincare doesn't want you to know. It's having an enormous 1 meter light directly in front of you, perfectly illuminating your face and removing all the like imperfection shadows. That's the key. Like you just have to walk around with a constant double diffuser, massive videography light, just pointed at the perfect angle at your face. That will do more than all the skincare in the world. All right, so we'll jump into it. Looks like people are trickling in. If you've just joined, welcome, welcome. We're about to get started. So today's a very special workshop because obviously, as you guys know, this is the 1 million subscriber special workshop. And for me, I'm always trying to make YouTube videos that I think will be helpful and valuable to all of you guys that are watching. But it's really ultimately about the number of people that I'm able to help and that I'm able to reach. And I remember when I got my 100K plaque, which is in the background there somewhere, I remember looking at this and thinking, wow, this is so cool. I can't believe I've got one. And I'm certainly never going to get the gold one because that's like 1 million. And I thought that's not really going to be realistic for me. So thank you everyone who's followed me and supported me over the last few years to help me reach this 1 million milestone. Special shout out to those that were with me since the 100,000 subscriber days back when I really had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and the content I made I think was tragic. But today's workshop is just about essentially saying thank you and trying to give back a little bit. Today's focus is going to be on stuff that I can't normally cover in YouTube videos because there's, when you make a YouTube video, you have to sort of play this algorithm game and you can't go into certain things in too much detail. You can't explain certain things a little bit too much. If people's attention starts waning off and then, people drop off, that video gets harmed. And so there are lots of these rules. But in a workshop, I don't have to worry about that. Like you guys are here that have really committed. You've woken up at, crazy times of the day to attend this. And so I'm able to just try to deliver as much value as I can in the 1.5 hours that we've got together. And I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for Q&A as well. So I'll cover the content. I'll tell you what the workshop's going to be about soon. And then we'll have lots of time for Q&A as well. So this workshop, I'm so used to saying this video, this workshop is going to be very interactive. And so you will be able to ask lots of questions. I will be getting you to actually do stuff during the workshop as well. So if you've got like pen and paper, that's going to be useful. If you don't have that with you, there's also questions and things that I'll be asking in polls that are outside of the YouTube platform. So in order for you to do those, if you're watching, preferably you should be watching this on like a computer or a tablet or something. Have a phone next to you so that you can be interacting through those polls and things as well. That's going to be really helpful. This is a workshop that will be helpful for you if you are a student or a professional, any learner that is wanting to learn how to learn more effectively and build a learning system. And I always talk about building a learning system. And today I want to give you the nuts and bolts of what that really means and exactly how to think about a learning system so that when you think about improving your learning system, you have a much clearer idea how to start and what to actually do. And ultimately, this is what leads to you having not only better grades, but more confidence, less anxiety, less stress about them. If you're a professional, it's about being able to focus more at your task in hand and learn on the job and pick up new skills and learn for problems that you're facing at work. But it's not going to be a lecture. And so one of the things that I want to introduce first is this platform that we're going to be using here, which is called Menti. You should be able to see this on screen now. So Menti is this interactivity sort of platform that we're going to be using. So if you want to jump on this, there's a little QR code, scan that. You can go to the thing, type in the code. Then I'll be doing polls and surveys and questions and stuff, and you'll see it on here. Cool. All right. I'll let you join there a little bit. Once you join, there's a little heart icon in the bottom there that you can tap away at, and that also lets me know how many people have joined up. I'll give you like 30 seconds just to get your devices sorted. Jump onto this before we get started. Cool. All right. So let's begin here. Here is the agenda of what we're going to be trying to cover today. The first thing that we're going to do is I want to give you just one quick win. Basically, I want to teach you just a very, very simple strategy that you can start using. And I'm going to teach this to you straight up front because I want you to actually use this for this workshop as well so that you can get more out of this workshop. After I teach you this quick strategy, we're going to go into why you actually need to think about and build a learning system, and then how to actually build a learning system the right way, and then plenty of time for that Q&A. On Menti, you can also see that at the bottom, there is a little Q&A thing. So you can actually ask your questions at any time, and then at the end, we'll go through and answer them. All right. So let's start with the quick win. Sorry, I just... there we go. Okay, so this is the technique that I want to teach you. It's called name the frame. Name the frame. Here's how it works. Anytime you're learning new information, your brain is always trying to figure out how to connect it to what it already knows. Those of you who have been watching my content for a long time, I've talked about this a lot. But it's very difficult for your brain to try to understand what it's hearing, as well as at the same time make that decision about how to connect it and how it's relevant. And so we can actually make it easier for our brain by making that decision up front and then revisiting that decision actively. And this is what naming the frame means. It simply means that before you go to learn something, or even during learning something, like right now in this workshop, for example, you think about why you are here and what you are trying to get out of learning this. What is the purpose? What is the intention? How is it going to help you? And you make that very clear, and you can even actually write it down. By doing this, it actually primes your brain to start processing the information differently. So different ways of framing will actually incentivize and make it easier for your brain to process information in different ways. So if you're there just saying, why am I here? I'm here to listen to this workshop. That's not a great frame, because you see that doesn't have any personal significance and relevance to you and what you're going to do with this information. That's a very passive intention. And this is the intention that most people go to lectures with, attend their classes with. And it's also the reason why when you get hit with that information, you're now going to have the double burden of trying to understand it as well as figure out why you need to know it. So we want to make this why much more specific. So instead of I'm here to just attend the workshop, it should be I am here to learn useful strategies that will help me to solve this problem, or that I can use for this particular goal. And now everything that I teach you, you're thinking through that lens. Okay, so how does that relate to this goal that I have or this problem in my context? And that will help you have better, more targeted questions, and will also allow you to internalize and actually use what I'm teaching you straight away. So this is a technique called name the frame. You can do this before any lecture, any workshop, any seminar, even during a lecture. If at any point you sit there and you start noticing, I'm not really sure why this is important, or you start getting overwhelmed, you can take a step back, give yourself 15 seconds to just name the frame and then re-engage with the material. It's a very easy technique that immediately forces a level of higher order learning. It will immediately boost your ability to engage, have concentration, and then retain that information. If you're really, really struggling with learning, this is probably not the thing that's going to save your life, but it's a great, super simple tool to have in the toolkit. So I'm going to carry that forward and ask you guys to name the frame for this workshop. And I want to do that by getting to know you guys a little bit better. So let's try to name the frame. Ask yourself, complete this statement. I am here to learn so that I can, and then fill in the rest. And be specific, right? So there's a couple of responses that are already on here, which are great. Perform better at work, study better. These are great goals to have. And I commend you for taking the time to attend a workshop to try to get better at it. But we want to be a little bit more specific than that, because the more specific we are, the easier it is for your brain to focus. The brain really thrives on having quite narrow focus. It's not good at multitasking. And for example, performing better at work or studying better is this huge, huge domain. And so it's really hard to focus on any single aspect of it, right? I can't just say, hey, study better. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I know what I need to do. So we want to think a little bit more specifically about which particular parts. What does it mean to study better? What is holding us back? Some great responses coming in through here. Awesome engagement, guys. Thank you for being such a great audience. By the way, I'm drinking out of a cup that I got for doing a keynote talk or workshop, I think. Yeah, I did a workshop at a medical students conference last year, I think. And as a thank you, they gave me this mug that has my face on it. So, I have some mixed feelings about this mug. It's definitely a weird one to give when guests come over to our house. Anyway, almost 500 responses. That's awesome. What I'm seeing here is that there is a lot of diversity in the types of challenges we've got. Some people more business, commerce, medicine, GMAT. I've seen in chat before, there's the UPSC exams, CFAs. We've got a mix of students and professionals. This is awesome. So whatever you wrote down, and if you think it's specific enough, I want you to hold on to that. Keep that frame and remember that frame so that when we go through the rest of the workshop, you can continue to calibrate yourself based on that frame and then ask the appropriate question. Remember, I'm here to try to give you as much value as possible, which means the better the question you're able to ask, the more value I'm able to give you. Awesome. I'll give you a few more seconds just to wrap up any responses that you've got there. After this is over, I'm actually also going to go through and read through the different responses as well. Someone just said, I love you, Justin. Thank you. All right. Let's share with you guys a little bit about my own story of the challenges that I had and the goals that I tried to reach, and then how the learning system kind of fits into all of that. And I won't make this too long. So this is a photo from when I was 17 years old. Genuinely, this is just before I started university. I look like every generic just Asian teenager is there. I'm literally, I don't know why I have this photo of me mid-bite, like mid-eating, just looking sad. But this is the version of me that entered into university, knowing nothing about how to study. Really, really, really committed to working hard and then trying to enter into medical school. And so all I did at this age when I was trying to enter into medical school is just study, study, study. And I barely ever thought about how to study. I can almost guarantee that every single one of you that's already on this workshop right now is thinking at a level that's more advanced than what I was thinking of when I was that age. And because I didn't know what to do, and because I didn't have any confidence, I had to overcompensate for that lack of confidence with more effort. Because at the end of the day, if you've tried your best and you still didn't succeed, there's nothing more you can do, right? And so that was the thought that kind of kept me going. I want to make sure I try my best so that I don't have any regrets. But there's different ways to try your best. And the way I tried is just through pure effort. I never really took the time to think about the other way of trying your best, which is making sure I'm doing the right things. I'm learning about what to do. And because I didn't do any of that, I had no idea whether my effort was actually translating into any results. And so I would be studying 20 hours a day. And I remember that the very, very first test that I sat, I need to get over 90% for every single test, right? That's the goal. At least 90% for every single test and exam. So my very, very first test, after at that point studying 15, 20 hours a day, I got 87%. And in response to getting 87%, I actually cried. And the reason is because I had no idea why I got that result and what I could do more. I just had to hope that the next time it would be better. And I just compensated for that by studying even more. And I just spent literally every waking moment of my life trying to study. And this is just a first year university exam. Like, it's honestly not so hard that it required me to do that. This is essentially just a story of my inefficiency and my inability to just think critically about the situation. You know, that's really what the story is about. And so I would just study more and more and more. And eventually, by the end of that, I did enter into medical school. I got my over 90%. I did do very well academically. And then I entered into medical school and realized that it's actually much harder in medical school than it is in the year before. And that there was absolutely no way I was going to make it through all of medical school studying the same way and just really burning myself out so extremely to that level. And that was basically how I sort of started thinking about how to learn. And so how I used to study, this was my learning system at the time. This is how I tried to improve my studying, is I just get the curriculum and I just study as hard as I can. And at some point in the second semester, one of my friends was like, yeah, I use flashcards. And I was like, flashcards? What is that? I've never heard of that before. And FYI, this is 2011 for me. And most of the studying YouTubers you know of, they didn't exist. Like, that was not even a thing that existed. I learned how to study from research papers. Influencers barely existed. It makes me sound so old now. Anyway, okay, so my friend said, hey, I use flashcards. And so I just said, okay, well, you use flashcards, so I'm going to use flashcards. I was just desperate for anything that I could apply my maximum effort principle to. And then I'd get a result that wasn't good enough. And then I'd think, okay, well, therefore I need to do more of it. And then that is pretty much my entire approach. Like that summarizes the entirety of how I thought about studying in that first year. And as a result, I became extremely burnt out. I was obviously sleep deprived, and I was quite significantly depressed during that year. And recovering from that year took me, probably 3 or 4 years after that. I think only really towards the end of my 5th year of medical school do I feel like I had actually recovered mentally, emotionally, and physically from having been so burnt out from that first year. And even despite working so hard, my results were inconsistent. I never got first in any exam. I'm pretty sure I had the first in hard work, but I never got first. I was just, 90% and above. And then when I got into medical school and I looked around at my classmates, I realized literally every single person here got the same grades as me, and none of them studied as hard. And continuing through medical school while I'm sitting there trying to study as much as I can to get through it all, my peers are not. They are out there having fun. They're enjoying the sunshine. They're using their lunch breaks to just chill out. They're skipping lectures because they don't feel like going, whereas I am obsessed with trying to figure out how to do this. And that, if you resonate with any part of that story, these are all signs that there is something to improve with the study system. And so after applying and thinking about systems and developing my system, which took a long period of time, this is, the transformation really, that's me on the right. You can't see my face, but you can kind of see I'm smiling. Here, I'll do the face for you. It's like, yeah. So I was really happy afterwards. This is just a couple of years ago when I graduated first in my class for my master's. And the master's it was a full-time master's program at Monash University. And the challenge that I created for myself was, how good can I do with my learning system? I want to create a comparison for how I was before. And I was able to do my full-time master's studying very, very, very little. I think I studied probably something like 40 hours in total across the entire year. And I graduated first. I got the highest possible grade for every paper. And I was the first student to ever receive 100% for one of the papers. And I was invited to be a guest lecturer for that paper before I'd even graduated. In fact, I actually even did a mini lecture for the paper while I was still a student, just based on them seeing my work. And that was, for me, like the amount of difficulty, the amount of effort that I put in is actually just a fraction of what I put in before. But what I had that I didn't have before was a very strong sense of confidence that when I do X, it leads to Y 100% of the time. So I know exactly how to use my time in the best possible way. And this is the value of when you start thinking in systems. This is what you're able to unlock. So this is really how you should think about learning, not the way that I did it before. If the flow that I had before, like this thing, if this is you right now, stop it. No longer. This is how you should think about it. Figure out what your learning goals are. Make that clear. If you don't know what your learning goals are, you're going to find it very difficult to make adjustments to your learning system to reach the goal. Number 2, study reasonably hard. If you're not studying at all, start studying. If you're already studying what you think is like a reasonable amount, you compare it to your peers, it's like, I'm not doing much less than everyone else. That's probably good enough. If your results are not good enough, if it's inconsistent, you are not getting any high yield impacts from just studying more. You now need to look at the results that you get and then evaluate your system. How can your system improve so without studying more, you get better results? You make targeted changes based on your understanding of your system. You continue to study reasonably hard, and then you see your results improve. The only time you go from studying reasonably hard to really hard is when the challenge kicks up. You leave that in reserve. You leave that in the tank so that when you really need it, you can draw down on it without burning out. But your default should always just be in that reasonably hard state, right? Never push yourself at your maximum for too long. Not only does it burn you out, but it also blinds you to understanding how you can actually get more value from the time that you are spending. And this is something that I wish I knew back when I was 17. Doing it this way is much more motivating. It's much less emotional. Like you just don't feel so, it's not a roller coaster of emotions every time you get a different type of result. You become much more focused on understanding what processes lead to those results. Over time, you continually get better, which actually directly helps to prevent against burnout. And ultimately, you're also more successful too. This is why this is the flow of how an ultimate learner develops their skills. Okay? So that was kind of like an understanding about why you need to really think about learning and systems. And before I talk about it a little bit more, I want to make it clear what is the difference between a technique and a system. So this is the Swiss cheese model. Have any of you guys seen this model before? The Swiss cheese model. So the Swiss cheese model is a great way of representing the way of thinking about a technique versus system, in that the most common question I probably get asked across like Instagram and YouTube is that someone will just say, what is the best learning technique? And it's an impossible question to answer because every single technique has gaps and holes. And so there is no technique that if you just use it will solve all of your problems. Like it actually just doesn't exist. And so you have to have multiple techniques. But now, if you understand that you have to have multiple techniques, it becomes obvious that the techniques you choose to stack together make a difference. So if you have 3 techniques that are all very, very similar, achieve this, very similar things, and have the same weaknesses, then your overall system has those weaknesses. So the trick to creating a system is about understanding the purpose of different types of techniques and then finding the best technique for that purpose, accepting that it's not going to fix all these other things. And then you have other techniques to fix those other things. And when you bring it together, it creates something that is, solid, right? The strengths of one cover the gaps of another. So we don't want this persistent hole like you can see that arrow going through at the top. You don't want a hole that is just across every single technique that you have. You want them all to be laid in such a way that your system is complete. And what I'm going to teach you very soon is how to think about a system to make sure that it's always complete. And this is the stuff that took me years and years to figure out, but hopefully by summarizing it within like 15 minutes, you don't have to go through that. So that is why you need a learning system. The next thing will be how to actually build the learning system. I'm going to do a quick pause here. Is that making sense? How are we feeling about it so far? The next part, I'm just going to go through and map out the components of a learning system, how to do it well, how to start thinking about it, right? It's going to get a little more technical, but I want to make sure we've got this groundwork here first, like fundamental perspectives. How are we doing so far? Cool. All right. Great. Now let's go through into the actual building the system part. Oops. Sorry. Yeah. All right. So Here we go. When you think about a system, and if I were doing a one-on-one session with you, this is kind of how I would, ask you about your system as well. The first thing is that there is prep, then there is processing, and there is performance. You guys can all see this okay? You're following along? My face is covering that part, so I'll just try to keep it away. Okay. So every learning system should have at least something. Like it could just be one thing in each of these areas. And if you have one thing in each of these areas, you're going to cover most of your bases. Like you don't really need to have a perfect technique for every single thing, but you do need to have at least something that's good enough at each of these points. So processing is what most people think about when they think about studying. Processing is like the big meaty part of learning. This is where you are usually in the lecture, listening to someone, you're writing your notes, you're doing your self-study. All of those activities are in this part here where it's about processing. The prep is about how you can make the processing easier to do. A learning system is really just about what can you do today that makes it easier for you tomorrow. That's the game we're playing. And so once you have good prep, it means that you can do better, more high quality processing. And then it sets you up for the final phase, which is performance. Performance is all the stuff that allows you to carry that knowledge through and use it in the way that you need to. And the strategies that you use here are different. So I'll go through each of these first. I'm going to start with the prep and then move consecutively through left to right. The most important word you should think about when it comes to prep is this word called priming. And priming is this big word that's used in the research very often, and it means a lot of things. It's actually quite complicated, but the simplest way to think about it is how do you set your brain up for success with what you are about to learn? And there are three main things that if you try to hit these three requirements, no matter what technique you use, it will probably be effective. And I will give you a technique that you can use at the end of this for priming. The first thing is, it should allow you to develop a good big picture understanding of what you are learning. The second thing is that it should give you an overarching purpose or relevance. And the third thing is that it should help you to offload the most complex idea. So each of these things, let me explain. Like I said about naming the frame, it's very difficult for your brain to understand something and then at the same time try to understand how it's relevant and where it fits. If your brain is not able to figure out where this fits and how it's related to everything else, you are at high risk of forgetting it. So anytime that you're reading something and you're just thinking about like, I feel like I'm going to forget this, I need to do it over and over again. You guys know, you know that feeling, right? Like that feeling of just like reading it again and again and thinking, okay, like I'm going to forget this. I just need to repeat it a few times. This is usually where you might make a flashcard or something like that. This feeling is your brain telling you, I don't know why you want me to keep this. It is saying, I'm going to throw this out because I don't think I need it. And then you are overriding it, saying, no, you need to keep it because I tell you to. That's not effective. That's you're working against your brain there. Developing a big picture understanding is one part of showing your brain where it fits. So if you say, overall, this topic is about these main ideas that come together and it almost sort of builds this story, then you have an overarching reference for how the smaller, more detailed parts fit within that. You're creating a structure for your brain to think through before filling it with all this detailed, dense, complicated information. The main mistake people make when they try to do any type of priming or pre-study or preparation before, like a serious study session or going into a lecture is that they focus on the details. They think the thing that I struggle with when I'm studying is covering all the details. Therefore, I'm going to cover all the details in advance. This is not correct. The reason you're struggling with the details in the first place is because there was no big picture relevance for where it fit. So the way you fix the issue with being overwhelmed with details is not spending more time with the details. It's making the details fit more intuitively, having it a place to live mentally. So the trick here, thinking about what the big picture is. The purpose and the relevance is very similar. It's thinking about, okay, I've got this big picture understanding of it. Why do I need to know that? This is basically naming the frame. Why do I need to know this? How am I going to use this? What is the real world applicability? What type of problems do I need to solve? This is this is just another way of helping you figure out how to organize and structure this information. And the final thing here is offloading complexity. So there are certain things that you might skim through and recognize that when you come to study this properly in the next phase of processing, this is the type of stuff that's going to be like really dense. You're going to struggle wrapping your head around it. This is a type of thing that you can start to unpack early on. And again, how do you unpack it? A complex thing is just a lot of simple things put together. If you feel it's complex, it's because you don't know the simple things that make it up. So the way that you offload complexity is taking the time in advance without having the pressure of like a lecture and having to keep up or something like that. You take the things that you think are the most complex and you think about breaking them up into the big picture and into its purpose, real use, applicability, relevance. So instead of just accepting that some concept is really hard to understand, take the time to say, okay, this concept must be simple at a certain point. At a certain level of breaking it down, it gets simple. Spend the time to make it simple. And then that really difficult part that would normally kind of derail you during a lecture or a workshop or in self-study, this is something that you now feel familiar with. You have saved yourself, your future self, that burden. So what are some techniques that you can do to achieve this? One of the simplest, like really easy ways of achieving this is to go through the material first, like before your main event, scan through and just pick out what you think are the main keywords. And then all you're going to do is go through those keywords and just think about connecting only the most important keywords together in a way that feels simple for you. And this used to be harder, but the reason I say this is actually fairly easy to do now is actually because of AI. It is really easy now to just take the keywords, think about how they might be connected together, and then you just go to something like ChatGPT and you say, hey, I'm studying this topic about this. Here's, at a very simple level, how I feel like it's kind of connected together. Is this right or wrong? If it's wrong, correct me. And you have like that lay person's, that very low level, simple discourse to just get an immediate snapshot. And this entire process can take you maybe only 15 minutes. And that 15 minutes can save you literally 15 hours of learning later on. An additional thing that you can do, so that's to help you get that big picture. Another thing that you can do for this is, like I introduced just before, name the frame. This is really true, especially for heavily technical procedural disciplines like coding, like software engineering, things like that, where there is a lot of stuff that you learn sometimes and you don't actually know how you're going to apply this. So making it explicit, okay, I am learning this because knowing this allows me to do what? And usually, here's the trick to make this really effective, is that there are multiple frames. Try not to have just a single reason why you're going to use this piece of information. Think about how this information could be used in multiple different contexts for multiple different purposes. And what this is going to do is prime you so that when you do need to use it in one of those different ways, it's not a new thought. You've already understood that it could be used in this way. And later, all you're doing is, oh, yeah, I already knew I could use it this way. Let's learn how to do that. It's a much simpler process. So these are just two things that you can do. They're very, very simple. Again, they take you combined, both of these things, 20, 30 minutes at most for a 1, 2, 3 hour, lectures worth of information. You absolutely do not have to go into the details. You can just skim through, pick out the things that you think are important. And as long as you exit this priming session feeling like you have a big picture understanding and you generally see how you're going to use this information, you have achieved 70, 80% of the benefit of priming. And there are many more advanced techniques that you can do on top of this, for sure. But those are optimizing to get 75% better, 80%, 85%, 81%. They're smaller adjustments. If you're not doing anything intentional with your priming and your prep right now, just start with doing this. It will make an immediate, tangible difference to how you feel with every point of studying that comes after this. So speaking of coming after this, once you've done your prep, you need to move into processing. I like to divide processing into two different parts. First of all is how you are thinking and how you are helping to think. So just before I jump into that, how are we about the priming stuff, like, and the prep? Like that's all making sense. This part's still pretty clear. We get happy to move on. So this is kind of, a third of your learning system. I would argue it's like, although this is technically like 1/3 of your learning system, it is probably 50% of the overall importance of your learning system. Like when you just do this, it just makes such a huge change to the rest of your learning experience. I will never not do this. Like I will never, ever not. It doesn't matter how busy I am. If I have to sacrifice practicing something, like relearning something, revising something I've already learned versus doing this, I'm always going to do this because this is the thing that plugs the boat. It plugs the hole in the boat. This is the thing that means that I have less stuff to worry about moving forward. If I stop doing this, now I'm on the hamster wheel, constantly trying to relearn stuff that I'm forgetting because I didn't set myself up properly for it, especially if it's a complex topic. All right, cool. All right, so processing. So now we've done the prep. We have a big picture understanding. We've got that relevance. And the really difficult things, we've spent the time to kind of break that down a little bit. Now it comes to the actual main learning event, the lecture, the workshop, the seminar, the 3 hour self-study block with the textbooks open and everything, where your main purpose is to really crunch through this volume, right? That experience, I often call that the main learning event. In the main learning event, the most important thing here is the thinking, right? This is your goalpost. Nothing matters if you are not thinking in the right way. It doesn't matter how you're writing your notes. It doesn't matter what apps you're using. It doesn't matter what technique you use. You can use the best possible technique there is and still feel that it is absolutely useless if you do not think in the right way. And mind maps are the best example of it because mind maps can be extremely powerful, but they can also be a literal complete waste of time. And that is because the correct way of doing mind maps is to use the mind map as a springboard to help you think in a certain way. But what most people do is that they will think about it purely at a technique level. They will just say, yes, I'm making connections, I'm drawing lines, I'm relating things together, but they don't use that as the entryway into exploring even deeper thinking. That's where the benefit lies. The thinking is where the benefit lies. And the reason why there are certain techniques like active recall, which is basically just whenever you recall something from your memory, the reason those techniques are so effective is not because they are innately more powerful than doing good encoding and something like a mind map. It's because it's much easier to do it correctly. Something like active recall, retrieval techniques in general, they force you to think in a certain way. When I test you and I ask you a certain question, you have to think about it in a certain way. I have forced you to. There is no shortcut. You either get the answer correct by thinking in that way, or you get the answer incorrect and you fail that. So even though, good encoding, really being able to understand and organize information well in the first place is probably the most important thing that you can do to improve your learning efficiency. One of the first things about building a learning system is not at all about getting better at mind maps. It's about getting better at the way you do your retrieval, because that is something that takes very little training, provides immediate improvement, and then trains your brain on how to think about the information so that you can replicate that type of thinking without needing to test yourself. I'll talk a little bit about this, the testing aspect of it soon, in the performance aspect. So all of this to say that there are many, many different techniques that you can use. And I will give you an example of just a couple, but really it could be anything, as long as that technique helps you to think in a certain way. So what is the way to actually be thinking about this? Well, the way that you should be thinking about it is like this. We'll go back to the flow in a second. So here's a little activity that we're going to do. On the screen, I've got a list of these concepts and keywords. These are all related, like simply related to learning skills, learning science. It's a small snapshot. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this list, and we're going to go through the different levels of processing so that you can actually feel what it's like to process at the level that provides the best results. The first thing that I want you to do is not that, because that's, oh man, these slides are really killing me. Okay, the first thing I want you to do is take this list, and I want you to just try to memorize all of it, okay? I'm going to give you about a minute right now to go through this list and try to memorize everything. Ready? Go. Okay, I'm going to probably cut that short. When you're doing that, I want you to just reflect on how that process feels to you. Most people, when they're just trying to memorize it all, it's very much a process of like reading it again. There's a lot of this repetition, and doing it for a long period of time, there's a lot of tediousness to it, right? It gets quite boring, and if you do this for like hours, you're going to get very drowsy. It's also really it's really tiring, but in an ineffective way. Like you don't feel good tired. You feel like your brain is just like, your energy is just slowly depleting through the process. So that's what level 1 looks like. So this is not very effective. Oh man, I gotta stop hitting that button. Okay, sorry. Let me just, hold on. Okay, okay. The second thing that we're going to do is I want you to now go through this list, and I want you to start comparing and grouping the ideas together. So here's what you do. Each word you look at and you just think, how is this concept similar to any of these other concepts? So for example, you might look at studying as a process and note-taking techniques, okay? And you might think, okay, these are similar to each other in that they're both talking about processes. Okay, and then you could say note-taking techniques and revision retrieval strategies. These are similar because they're both like studying techniques. So you would create a group, and that group might be called techniques, right? And within that group, you'd have note-taking and revision. But you could have another group as well, right? So I'm not saying you have to group it in that way. I want you to go through the list, look at how the words are similar to each other, and then group them based on similarities and actually write it down. Write down your keyword for what the name of the group is and what fits in underneath that group. And try to keep your groups fairly tight. Don't have one group with like 9 things in it. If you do, create subgroups. Have it so that no group has more than 4 points coming off of it. So if you've got more, you can probably create groups within that group. So try that. Okay. You don't have to write it in the chat, by the way. You can just write it in, your pen and paper or whatever you're using to study. I'm going to give you just like 20 more seconds. Just do your best to try to find at least 1 or 2 groups. Okay. By the way, there will be a copy of the slides and a copy of the recording for those who want it at the end. This workshop is not going to be permanently on YouTube. We wanted, this is like a special event. So we wanted to make it, for the people that took the time to come here. But for those of you that did come here at the end, we'll have a little thing. If you let us know, we will actually send you a permanent link to access this. So if you want to do this activity again later, I would strongly encourage that you do. Just try your best to engage right now. And then later we can send you the slides and everything. Okay. So after doing this level, hopefully what it feels like is that you should feel that it is a lot more back and forth. You're less like in order going down the page, and it's more like you're scanning up and down, and you're thinking more actively. You can see that you're thinking more deliberately and more intentionally, and that it's a little less comfortable as well. It may be quite unfamiliar. How many of you felt that when you were trying to do this level 2, that it was feeling a little bit unfamiliar? And that it was kind of like, some people could describe this as a bit more chaotic than what they're used to. Okay. So hopefully it should do. Okay. And if it didn't feel that way for you, then it either means that you're already operating a level above that, or perhaps you just need a little bit more time to focus in and do it. And it might be difficult in this workshop setting, I understand. So let's take that to level 3 now. Level 3 is what I want you to do is I want you to go through this list, and I want you now to rate each item out of 10. So for example, studying as a process, how important do we think that is compared to everything else on this list out of 10? And you can have multiple things rated the same, like you can have 3 things that are 5 out of 10. It doesn't matter. But I want you to be thinking quite actively about how important this is relative to everything else, and why you think it might be more or less important. So go through this list, and for each point, try to rate it out of 10. We're going to just do like another 30, 45 seconds of this. I saw a quick question here in the chat which says important in terms of what? That's a good question. You can actually choose whatever frame of importance you want. Important for learning science, important for you practically. You can do it based on the frame for you. Important for you practically getting value out of this activity, you can even do it. It's completely up to you how you want to assess the importance. Most of the time, I would just recommend assess the importance relative to the topic itself. Like in terms of this topic, which is learning to learn, learning skills, how important is this in those parameters? Okay, I'm gonna give you 10 more seconds to just try to rate like 1 or 2 more items out of 10. Okay, do your best. Really try to make that rating accurate. Don't just be like, arbitrarily assigning a number. Just really try to think about how important it is relative to everything else. Okay, so this activity, rating it out of 10, this is actually, this technique was actually initially done by a scientist in a psychology research paper where they got half of the room to try to memorize a list of words, and they got the other half to just rate them out of 10. And the room that was able to rate it out of 10, I believe, it's been a while since I read the study, but I think they had 30% greater retention than the room that was actually just trying to memorize it. And the reason that is because, again, when you do this, hopefully you should feel like this process is in a way quite similar to level 2, but in a way a little different. So it will be similar in that you're going back and forth. You're not just thinking about one thing by itself. You're thinking, okay, there's this thing, but also is it more or less important than this next word? Like, is confidence more important, or is reflective ability more important? If confidence is a 6, would reflective ability also be a 6, or would it be a 5? Right? There's this constant back and forth. There should be this level of confusion. Like, you're not really sure. There are lots of kind of little that may not necessarily be as explicit as you're thinking of questions, but there is this sort of like feeling of discovery, exploration, uncertainty that you're trying to sort of think about and piece together. But ultimately, because you know you have to rate it out of 10, you're making a judgment. You're creating some kind of judgment on your thought process. Okay, you may be uncertain, but I think it's a 3 out of 10, right? You're making that judgment. So that part is, in a lot of ways, that's similar to level 2 in that you're going back and forth. It can feel a little bit chaotic, and you're having to make a decision about how you're going to group this information. So this level should have felt, similar in that there's that discomfort, there's that confusion. How many of you felt that way doing this activity? If you did feel this way, that's a good thing. So one of the most important points, and I honestly say, if you take nothing else away from this workshop other than this single statement, I would still consider it a win. If you did level 2 and level 3 and you felt that this process was challenging and uncomfortable, it created confusion, uncertainty, it felt chaotic, remember this feeling, because that is the feeling of effective, active learning. And it can feel completely different to your prior experience of learning. And this is what it means to really do hard work. This is the type of work that most people don't do. This is the thing that feels uncomfortable, but produces better memory, deeper understanding, much more quickly than just trying to memorize it. And in fact, I can almost guarantee for the words that you try to compare and rate out of 10, you feel better. You feel more familiar. You feel like you will remember those words better than after you did level 1, just trying to memorize it all, where it just seems like a stream of meaningless data. Even though you haven't even really studied it at all, I'm willing to guarantee that after doing level 2 and level 3, these words feel like they have more meaning to you. You feel more comfortable, and you feel like for some reason you have a sense of confidence. That's because your brain is getting primed and it's connecting with it. That is what learning is about. So if this felt uncomfortable, good. Remember that. Seek that feeling every time you study. That is what it means to think at the right level. But it doesn't just end there. So what you can do after that is you can actually connect all of these things together to construct a schema. So you compare everything, you group them, and then you rate your groups. So you could say, I could group this in terms of techniques, or I could group it in terms of mindset, or I could group it in terms of difficulty or impact. And then now you have to rate which group you think is the most meaningful and intuitive for you. And once you've rated that, you connect them all together to create an overall flow. And that is the right way of doing a mind map. And you can see how that process is completely different to how most people do it. It starts with the thinking. It's represented through the map, right? So that would be level 4. And then level 5 would be to then rate your schema. So once you've created an overarching flow of how the information connects, you can then rate how good you think the entire structure is compared to an entire other way of thinking about it. This is almost like, I could explain this topic like this. Hey, there are 3 things that you can think about, and within these 3 things, there's these 2 things that relate to each other, and then once you have these 2, that leads to this final result. Like I could explain it that way, or I could explain it a completely different way. And you have to make a decision about judging it. So it's the same process of level 2 and level 3, but you're applying that to itself. You're grouping it, and then you're comparing the groups, and you're rating the groups, and you're connecting it, and you're comparing the connected groups, and you're rating the connected groups to other connected groups. So I'm not going to get you guys to do this right now, but by all means, feel free to try this in your own time when you get the slides of the recording. When you do this activity, think about what level you feel comfortable, and at what level you start feeling this is different and uncomfortable. For many people, that will just be going from level 1 to level 2. That is your current level of processing. Where you feel comfortable is your current level. Your goal is just to get to the level above it. Don't go from level 1 to going to level 5. You will feel overwhelmed, and your brain will want to explode, and you're going to become like a Squidward brain. You know, it's not going to be a good experience. Go from level 1 to level 2 and just stay at level 2 until it feels comfortable. At level 2, you will already start feeling benefits. And then at level 2, go to level 3. Again, you will see benefits. And then once that becomes comfortable, you continue to work your way up through the different levels. So that is what the levels of processing is like. So let me go back to this system. So when we were talking before about the thinking, now when I say processing, you should have a very clear idea in terms of the levels of processing that we just went through. We went from level 1 to level 5. So your goal is to go from whichever level you are right now and simply go up one level. That's your win criteria for doing processing correctly and having a good system. Now we can think about the helping to think. So this is the technique that you use. And the technique you use here is much the same. I want you to think about the current technique you use when you're note-taking. Note-taking is, I think, one of the most powerful examples of this because it's your best friend for good processing. If you currently write notes very linearly, you're typing them out in bullet points, I want you to just take one step towards getting a little bit more non-linear and reflective of the thinking process. So obviously when you're doing that back and forth thinking and it's chaotic, that's not well represented in linearly written notes. But it's very difficult to go from linearly written notes and then thinking this way and suddenly changing everything. So you don't need to change everything. Just go one step further. Go from linearly typed notes, just cut down the amount of words. Just start writing more bullet points. Just start adding notes about the certain relationships that you feel. Make little tiny mind maps of just 1 or 2 concepts connected together. Make little tiny drawings of how you're comparing things together. And then when that's comfortable, take the next step. Go through and actually draw out more of how you're thinking. Your goal is to try to represent your thinking exactly in your notes. And that takes time and will be uncomfortable as well. But when you do that, it means that your brain is mostly focused on doing this processing, which is where the learning comes from. And then you're using your note-taking to help your brain do that thinking. You're not just trying to track all these ideas in your head. You're actually using your notes strategically to help your brain do this difficult processing. So that's the processing aspect of it. The actual technique you use, like how you go about doing this, how long your study session is, how many lectures you cover, which one you study for. These things don't really matter that much. They make a 2 or 3% difference to the grand scheme of things. The answer is whatever allows you to think at the right level and lets you take notes that help your brain think at that level. That is the best technique for you. That is the one that you should arrive at. If you've got a 1-hour lecture versus a 2-hour lecture, if you have less time to study or more time to study, or you can only study on a weekend, or you're studying at work or on the job or in the bus or on the train, all of these things will affect what is the best for you. But at the end of the day, it all just comes down to what is the thing that allows you in your circumstances to think at the right level and to use a technique that helps you to think. And any technique that isn't helping you to think or harms your ability to think by forcing you into a lower level, these are techniques that you should work on removing. They are not just unnecessary, they are holding you back. Obviously, there's lots of kind of sub techniques and stuff within that, but I'm not going to be able to go through that. A single technique going through in detail would be like an hour and a half by itself. And I have lots of videos where I talk about you will see that in my videos I talk about these principles and give you examples of these principles all of the time. It's a common theme. So that was prep and processing. If you have something here in the prep, in the priming, in the prep that helps you to get that big picture and the relevance and offload that complexity, and then you're following that with some method of note taking that helps you think at the right level, 70, 80% of the benefit of developing this learning system, you're building that. That's there, right? So before I move on to performance, which is actually the easiest part, I'll just have a quick look at the chat. How are we feeling about things so far? Still making sense? I know we've gone through a lot of stuff, but I want to, again, try to just give you as much of this value as possible. And then I'm just going to cover the performance aspect of it, and we're going to have some Q&A. And by the way, the technique you use, like I literally mean it can be anything. Some people, their ability to think is just so strong that they actually don't even need any technique. I've had friends who they just listen and read. They literally never write notes. They just listen and they read. And for them, that's enough. Like they don't even need an augmentation because their ability to just think at a high level is so strong. Lucky for them, but I'm not one of those people. I need help, and so figuring that out is something that has allowed me to sit on par with these top 0.1% performers. And if someone needs a technique and it works for them, it means absolutely nothing about whether it's going to work for you unless it is fulfilling these criteria, right? This is where you come to every single time. Does it help me think at the right level? If the answer is no, it's not going to work for you. All right. Cool. Let's talk about performance now. So this is the final part, but this is the part that people are usually more familiar with. So in terms of performance, I want to talk about it in terms of two parts. One, which is pre-performance, and the other, which is actual, let's just say during performance. The during performance part is stuff that helps you to just perform like in an exam or when you actually need to use it. And this is, a lot of it is just going to be about repetition, exposure, and fluency. So if, for example, you feel like you do really, really good studying, but the thing that actually holds you back the most is just that you get really nervous during an exam. Like that nervousness is not, if it's really significant, that's a completely separate issue. Doing good priming is not going to help you with the nervousness. What will help you with that nervousness, because that's like a during performance issue, is just repetitive exposure and then trying to establish fluency within that repetitive exposure. So you just put yourself in situations that make you feel nervous step by step. So you practice having that experience, more and more until you don't feel that nervousness anymore. There's another thing that you can do, which is rituals. So I used to have this ritual when I was in my first year of medical school, which I don't have anymore because I feel I completely don't need it. But I did at the time because I used to be really, really nervous about exams. Like really nervous. I used to be really, really nervous about exams, like hands really clammy, kind of just like, just hanging in there sort of thing, because I pour so much of myself into preparing for this exam. And so what I would do is there was a song that I would listen to, and I would only listen to that song before an exam. I would literally never listen to others. If it came up on my playlist before, I would skip it. I would only let myself listen to it before an exam, and I conditioned myself to associate that song with focus. I also never looked through my notes before an exam because I felt that looking through my notes immediately before entering into a room is a sign that I'm not confident in the preparation that I already did. And the thing that's going to make more of a difference is my confidence more than what I happen to read on that page before I walk into the exam. So I would never like review my material immediately before the exam. I'd make sure I get really good sleep. I'd make sure that I have a shower in the morning. Usually, if the exam is later in the day, I'll make sure I do some exercise in the day. Like that day is just about making sure I'm at my optimum state to perform, walking in there feeling confident. And if it's a really, really important exam, I will still do much of that ritual, like great sleep. Like you should never, ever do an all-nighter before an exam because it actually affects your ability to retrieve knowledge through something called sleep-dependent memory consolidation. You know what? I feel like I got that term wrong. Anyway, sleep basically allows you to use the things that you've learned. So if you're sleep deprived, especially if you've done multiple all-nighters before an exam, you can do some all-nighters, sure. You probably shouldn't. But if you do, just make sure at least the day before the exam, you get really good sleep. And that's going to allow you to actually use what you studied. Otherwise, you just wasted your time. And then when you enter into the exam, you should feel like you're bringing the best version of yourself into it. I also used to do this thing with my pencil. Like I'm not really good at, like some people are really good at like spinning their pencil. Like I'm going to do this right now in front of 2,000 people. And I'm probably going to fail it. Okay, I dropped it. That activity, like for me, became like a indicator of my confidence. If I'm feeling confident enough to try to spin my pencil before I start the exam, that was me like forcing myself to do the thing that I know is like, I'm going to drop it. It's going to make a sound. I'm going to have to like whatever it is. So I would deliberately spin my pencil until I do it successfully to like force myself into this state of just kind of focusing in. I think it was almost like a mindfulness ritual that I would do. How much of a difference does all of that stuff make to my actual performance? I think probably less than 5%. The sleep, definitely important. But this listening to the music. Oh, my webcam just completely died. Sorry, guys. Let me just swap to a different webcam that I've got here. Hold on a sec. It's not happened before. I will be back in just a second. Here we go. Ugh. Sorry, tech issues. I guess I've never tried streaming with that webcam for so long before, and it just decided to like give up on me. Sorry guys, just give me 1 second to fix this. Okay, yeah. So it should be all good now. You can still see me okay? All right. Okay, so yeah, so how much difference does all this ritualization stuff make? I think it's fairly minimal, but I still think it was helpful for me in those early days. When I was first trying to really learn how to manage my anxiety and nerves, I think it was helpful. Over time, I've just become more and more confident overall in my abilities. And so now I know that when I study something and I walk into an exam, I feel confident because like I know I've got this handled. Like I don't have anything to be nervous about fundamentally. Like I know that even if my performance isn't that great, I'm still probably going to do well. So that comes with time from building everything else in the system. That's for sure. But for those of you that are struggling acutely with this performance, these are some of the things that I would do. So graduated exposure into environments that make you feel a little nervous, having some rituals, and then eventually over time, it should get better. But what about pre-performance? So pre-performance, really, this is actually about testing yourself. And there are a few mistakes that people make, which is that they do not test their gaps and weaknesses. And that they test themselves too late. In order to have a good learning system, you have to test yourself at a regular interval to catch the right types of gaps early enough. And here's how you should always think about looking for gaps. The first type of gap you should always look for is a big picture gap. In the program, we call this a logic layer gap. This is something that affects the way you view the entire topic. So what are the ways that you can use that test you on a big picture? This would be complex problem solving. These are discussions. This is stuff like teaching the entire topic. These are strategies that force you to use your knowledge at a wide level and force you to see how the ideas are actually connected together. You want to find these gaps first, because if you have an issue with the gap at this level, it's going to affect the way that you understand and can remember all the information that comes downstream from it. And if you leave this type of gap to just before an exam, then you have to fix those things in a very short period of time. That's not a good situation to be in. That's usually the situation where you realize you've got a major gap and you just think, well, let's just hope I don't get tested on this. But because it's a big picture gap, you probably will be tested on this. So for that reason, your big picture gap finding, this should ideally happen within the first 1 to 2 weeks of learning the material. I usually like to stack a Saturday for doing these types of big reviews. The second level gap that you find is then the mid-level. And this should naturally happen from testing yourself again, just answering slightly less complex problems, but more specific, more narrow. So you're getting deeper, but narrower with the questions. And this happens after your first 1 to 2 weeks. So it depends on how much time you've got before your exam or assessment or wherever you need it. But I'll just call this sort of 2 to 3 weeks plus. And then the low level, this is just your details, your fact recall. This is the stuff that happens either in parallel or crammed. So parallel means that you create a bunch of flashcards on day one when you're learning it, and then whenever they're due, you just do those flashcards. That's parallel, and you can do that. That's fine. Just remember to do the other things first. If you're not doing the prep and you're not doing the processing and you're just relying on low-level flashcards to set you through, you're going to be flashcarding for the rest of your life. You can either do it like that or you can just cram it. Low-level detail is a type of stuff that is so detailed and specific that it's usually hard to connect it meaningfully in a wider structure or a wider network. This is the type of stuff that it's actually hard to hold on to this information long term because it's naturally less relevant. So this is the type of stuff that you could actually try to cram last minute. And you'll notice that actually the way that a lot of people study is almost exactly the reverse. They spend the first part of their studying focusing on the low level, and then if they have time, they work towards increasingly more complex. And sometimes the first time they ever test themselves at really thinking about information in a different way, challenging their perspective, thinking about how to use the information in a way that's connected together, is in the exam itself. And that's when you get that feeling like, this is actually kind of interesting. I wish I wasn't in an exam learning this for the first time. That's not a good situation to be in. So you want to reverse it. The low-level stuff is easier to get through very quickly, and you only need it for a short period of time. Or you can do it through parallel. but make sure that you're prioritizing big picture gap finding first. The second thing is, this is kind of like how you do it. But the other thing on top of that is you actually have to do it. Like, you have to be looking for your gaps. Do not just test yourself on the concepts that you know you're already more confident with. The purpose of testing and retrieval is to find your weaknesses. And a lot of people feel insecure about testing their weaknesses, and therefore they actually just divert away from it. So you have to actually test your weaknesses. And for this one, obviously, this one was just about have a regular schedule, and that schedule I've given you here. Okay? So there's, again, with all of these things, there's more that I could talk about, but, in terms of giving you a big picture overview of what it's like to build a learning system, what a good learning system should look like, this is it. Every good learning system should have prep, processing, and performance. You should always do some kind of priming that gives you a big picture, purpose, and offloads complexity. You should always try to think at the right level and use a method of note-taking that helps you think. And you should always think about, if nervousness is a big deal for you, having some kind of exposure training to reduce that nervousness, having some kind of ritual, and improving your pre-performance by testing your gaps and weaknesses at an interval, starting from the big picture issues first, working your way down to the lower levels. If you are doing that, if your learning system looks like this, like I said, 70, 80%, if I look at someone who's learning like this is an intermediate to advanced level learner. And there's definitely more things to improve this even more, and there's nuances with each one of these techniques. But if you start with this is an extremely solid, versatile, lifelong way of thinking about learning. And whether you're in high school or university or a professional in whatever industry, these same exact principles will apply. Like, I promise they will apply, because I have personally applied them when I do workshops for every industry that I can think of. These are just fundamental ways that your brain works, and we're just building a system around that. So again, I will also make sure to take a screenshot of this one as a PDF, high resolution, and we'll include it as well, that you can take away and have a look at and peruse through in more detail yourself as well. So, don't worry. I'll make sure you've got access to that. Okay. So, now the next thing is to finish us off here. I want us to now take a little bit of time to try and assess our current learning system based on these processes, right? So you'll see this has now appeared on your devices. So go through and just map it out for yourself. Anything you rate yourself a 1 or a 2 out of 5, write it down on a piece of paper next to you, because those are the points that are probably going to be high yield for you to work on. If there's something that's like a 3 or a 4 or even a 5 out of 10, yes, it doesn't mean you can't optimize it, but optimizing it is not going to make a big difference to your results probably. So as you fill this out, anything that's 1 or a 2, note that down on a piece of paper separately. Give you a little bit of time to fill that in, and I'll just see how where people are at and how people are feeling about this so far. So this, by the way, this one that's being shown here, this is like an aggregate of everyone that fills it in. It's not like any one person's. I'm just interested to see what the average learning system of everyone that's currently on here looks like. Okay, so it looks like for most people, the prepping and priming part is definitely more lagging behind. And that's certainly very common. And that's great because that's fairly easy and it's also quite high yield. That's cool. Okay, let's, I'll give you another 10 seconds to just fill that out. 10 more seconds, and then I'll move on to the next one. Alrighty. Cool. Let's move on to the next one here. So this one is actually a more interesting one. Is, are you in a position to improve? So as you all know, I've coached a lot of people, and there are certain attributes and behaviors and mindsets and ways of thinking about learning that I found can either help or hinder your ability to improve in the first place. So let's say that your current learning system is not very good. That's fine. We all start somewhere. Mine was probably worse than yours. But the real question is, are you thinking about improvement in a way that means that over time you will actually get better? Because here's the fact. Some of you that are watching will not improve. You will watch this and then you'll feel like, oh yeah, I understand that. And then you will go away and then nothing will change. And I think these 5 things are the things that dictate whether you will actually improve or not. So again, for these, if there's anything that's a 1 or a 2 or even a 3 out of 5, that's something for serious reflection and to focus your attention on. Because you do need all 5 of these things to improve. And if you think about it, missing just one of them, you can probably already see how that would stop you from actually improving in the first place. Okay. So it seems like, and you will have all, taken it for yourself. If there are lots of things that you need to think about and reflect on, please do reflect on it. This is the stuff that's going to make a difference. This slide is probably the one that really is going to make more of a difference to your trajectory in terms of how you and whether you actually improve than the techniques themselves. So I talked about the bonus resources. So if you want to receive this recording, we're going to do Q&A after this. We've gone a little bit over time, but I just wanted to make sure I cover all of this quickly for you guys. I apologize for those of you that really needed to, finish in time. That's my fault. But thank you so much for attending and being such a great audience for so long. So before we go into the Q&A, for those of you that do want a copy of the slides and a copy of a permanent link to the recording that we'll put up, and I'll also make sure to include this diagram here as well. If you want that, then you can go onto this. You'll see that on there you can fill in some of your details, and at the bottom of there is a little checkbox to say, hey, I want this, I want these slides and stuff. You'll also see on there's a little survey. This survey is really valuable to me because it allows me to understand what type of content you guys find value in. So we're always thinking about what's going to be the best for our audience. And I feel like the people that took the time to attend a workshop for like almost 2 hours, you guys are like prime audience. Like you're the ones that are like really proactive, really committed. So I would really love to know what type of content you want to see more of, what type of formats, what type of styles, what level of depth, specificity, things like that. So there's a little survey on there as well. That information would be really, really helpful. So you can go to iCanSci.com/1mil to get that. And we will move on to the Q&A. So let's have a look for any Q&A from the audience on Menti. So if you have any questions that you wanted to ask me, now is the time. You can chuck them into that Q&A panel there, and they will pop up once our moderating team has had a look. Cool. So first question that's come up here is, what seems to be the most, oh, by the way, you guys can also vote on the on the questions that you like the most, that other people have written. So that's, I'll try to do it in most voted first. What seems the most common pitfall I encounter when coaching? The most common pitfall is the stuff that was about in that previous radar. Are you in a position to improve? A lot of people aren't willing to experiment, make mistakes, do things, take action. There are a lot of people that are sort of in this cycle of almost They want to feel like they're improving because it's easy to watch a video, attend a workshop even. And I'm not calling out anyone in particular, right? But I'm just saying, as a behavior, it's really easy to like be in this passive mode where you're trying to consume stuff and then feel like you're making progress when you're really honest with yourself, it's not. And having the insight to realize I need to take action and I'm not taking action. That insight, like that understanding and self-awareness is a key differentiator between people that I think actually improve and are coachable, because people that are not coachable do not have that insight because they're resistant to action. And resistant to action means resistant to change and resistant to improvement. So thanks for the question. Really good question. Cool. How is the purpose and big picture understanding related? Okay, so a big picture understanding is just being able to almost see the entire image. So if you think about a jigsaw puzzle and you see the picture on the box, right, which is like what it's meant to look like when you finish the jigsaw puzzle, that's the big picture understanding. It means that when you look at every individual piece, you have a reference point to understand like where it fits. It's kind of like understanding how books in a library are organized or how items in a supermarket are organized. If you have a general understanding of the structure and where things are, then you can navigate correctly. Like you can find the book you need quickly. And you can, I mean, this is not really the case with a library or a supermarket, but you can combine things quickly together as well, right? So that's what the big picture is. Understanding the purpose is about understanding how you will then use that big picture understanding. And therefore, that gives you an idea about different ways that you might group things, different ways that you might connect things. It changes the importance you place on certain things because it's not just, hey, it's connected, but it's also, it's connected and so what? Why do I need to care about the fact that it's connected? So they both go hand in hand. The purpose helps you to evaluate the utility and the purpose and rate it, give it an assignment of importance and judge it. Whereas the big picture is actually just showing you how it's connected and allowing you to navigate those connections quickly. So both are necessary. When you prime, how thoroughly do you read the text? How well do you need to understand it? Great question. Not very thoroughly at all. You should be just skimming through. In fact, I would go to a point where I'm almost never reading more than 1 or 2 sentences in one go. Like it's just very, very quickly getting an idea of it. So if it's, let's say, 20 pages of a textbook, I might read for 4 or 5 minutes only. And I'm not like trying to read fast or anything. You're just really focusing on only the big ideas. The words within every single sentence, that's not going to make a big difference. What's going to make a difference is the headings, the bold words, the big terminology. So you can skim through and just collect the keywords that way. How do you manage all this when having a family? This is a great question. The way that I see it, there's 2 perspectives I think that are really helpful. The first perspective is that going from where you are now to the best you can be very overwhelming and take a very, very long time. But you probably don't need to be the best you can be. You just need to be better than right now. And it's hard to know how much better you need to be, especially if you're early on in the journey where you can get very quick gains in a short period of time. It's like beginner gains, kind of. If there's lots of things that are high yield, every one high yield thing that you address makes a noticeable improvement to your overall quality of life and performance. And what that does is that it gives you more free time. And so the other thing is that you're on your own timeline. You may not be as fast as you wish you could be, but you're going to be as fast as you can be balancing the other priorities in your life. Like, I'm not saying take your family and then just like put them in an, isolated like prison on an island for the next 2 months and just focus on, learning to learn. Like, that's not realistic. I've had students that they can only commit a couple hours a week. And that's scattered here and there. They just stay up a little bit longer on whatever day, get up a little bit earlier here and there. They do some stuff like in the car before coming home from work, before they get distracted by other things. They just find little pockets of time here and there. And you just try to make those pockets of time work and to do things effectively. Like that's one of the reasons why when for those of you that know, like I have the program at iconstudy.com, right? So when I designed the program, like one of the key considerations was how do I make sure that people can still find value even if they've only got 2 or 3 hours a week. And even if you're not progressing as quickly as 10 hours a week, 2 to 3 hours a week is still more progress than 0 hours a week. And each problem you solve allows you to have a better quality of life. And it gets continually easier and easier. So I think it's a great question. And I think don't get discouraged. Just measure yourself only against yourself and keep trudging forward. How long does it take to master this? Okay, so how long it takes to master is a very... Oh, I don't know what happened there. I think I just suddenly skipped like heaps of questions. Sorry, let me just go back. Yeah, how long does it take to master this? Mastering takes years. So I've been doing this for a long time. And would I say I've mastered every single part of this? Probably not. Probably not. But it gets to a point where mastering it becomes kind of meaningless because it's already just good enough for everything that you need. And good enough can come very early. Like I've had students that join the program, they're expecting that they're going to spend, a year really like committing to it or 6 months really committing to it. And then after like 3 weeks, they're just like, oh, actually kind of like the main problems I had already are solved. And now that main problem is solved, it's, they don't really have any urgency anymore. So it really depends on what is holding you back and how, like the gap between how good you need to be to solve that versus where you're at now. And a lot of people have things that they're like a 2 or a 3 out of 10 right now, and they only need to be like 4 or 5 out of 10 to reach the goal that they have to reach. And so in that case, how long does that take? That can take weeks or a couple of months. What I would say is that for most people, making meaningful improvement doesn't happen in less than a few weeks. Usually it doesn't take less than a few weeks. Isn't pre-studying and processing just making connections and ratings? What is the difference? So the process you do at pre-study and the process you do while processing is the same type of thinking, but what we're doing is that we are compartmentalizing the information. We're saying that there's a lot of information that is very, very simple that allows us to achieve these main connections and overall big picture without needing to spend a lot of time. But if we didn't do it in advance, it would be difficult for us to try to do that at the time of learning it, like in the main learning event. So we're making the decision to kind of almost, if you imagine the topic kind of like this block, and that at the top of that block is like the simplest, most superficial knowledge. And then as you go down the block, it's deeper and deeper. And this block is a topic. What we're doing is we're taking a slice of just the top level. And we're saying this small little slice, I'm going to do this now. And that means that the block that you have to cover later is not as large. But because you're just focusing on the main ideas and creating these strong anchor points, it makes it much easier to process the rest of the block. So it's a really strategic move that we're doing to balance the cognitive resources and mental just thinking capacity that we have. What's the best way to prep as a professional when you don't know in advance what's coming at you? Okay, so this is a great question. Not just as a professional, but in any situation where you don't have the ability to like scan it in advance, there are 2 things that I'd recommend here. Both of them can work completely effectively. Number 1, just maybe in a professional setting, it's less possible sometimes. Try to proactively get it in advance. This works surprisingly well, like more often than you'd think. If it's a lecture, sometimes just ask the lecturer, hey, I'd really like to get a overall understanding about what I'm learning and do a bit of priming for myself. Would it be possible for me to just get, like the slides in advance? And if they say no, you can just look up the lecture or learning objectives. If you're a professional, It's kind of the same thing. It's not a lecture or learning objective. It could be a project objective, a meeting brief, or an agenda for something. And proactively asking, hey, what can I do to prepare for this? And if you just get a general understanding about the objectives and the main things you might be thinking about, then you can just use Google searching, ChatGPT to just generate what maybe the 5 or 6 probably most important keywords are going to be. And even if you don't have a perfect one-to-one match of exactly what's going to be covered with exactly what you primed for, because when you prime, you're only working with the main ideas, you will probably have a lot of overlap between what you cover and what you don't. For example, if I primed for a first-year biology lecture, I could probably prime the same way for almost any university in the world because the fundamental ideas are just exactly the same. And the actual way it's delivered in the lecture doesn't change. So it's the same thing in a professional setting, is that there are usually things that you can do to either be more proactive at getting insight into what's coming up, or using the objectives and your understanding about what it's about to generate a list of keywords and concepts to prime yourself in advance. And that's, again, a strategy that I use. How would you create a learning system for someone interested in self-learning? There's no deadlines or teachers to keep me on check. Create your own checks. Create your own checkpoints. Create your own tests. If you follow the learning system as I've told you, the pre-performance stuff, like there is some reason you're gonna want to learn this, right? Like it doesn't have to be a test. It doesn't have to be work or anything. Just there's some reason you want to learn it. So use that as the goal, and then create your own checks along the way if you want to optimize for your learning. Or if you're just learning for fun, then you don't even need to really optimize it. Just learn it. Forget about the performance stuff. Leave yourself with an incomplete learning system if you don't even have any results that you need to optimize for. Just have fun with it. How do I stop procrastination long-term and stay disciplined in my study routine? This is a great question, and I know that so many of you are going to find this relevant. It's also a question that I'd say it's hard for me to answer right now in the Q&A because it's a whole new set of concepts. It's a whole new kind of branch of psychology. Let me, in the briefest possible way, try to give you what I think makes the biggest difference. The first thing is understand two things. The first thing is that procrastination is not a thing. Be specific about what you're procrastinating with. What's the mechanism? The solution to procrastinating with scrolling on your phone versus playing games versus productive procrastination like cleaning the house, the solution is different. So be specific about what the behavior is and be specific about what triggers the behavior. Don't just wrap it all up into the word procrastination because that puts it inside a black box that you cannot open and do anything about. Be specific. What is the trigger? What is the behavior? What happens? And then what do you do as a response? Once you can see the chain for what it is, then you can look at it in a more targeted way. Okay, well, it seems that when this happens, I do this. Well, what happens if I just make this unavailable for me? Change the environment. The second thing, and this is actually probably the most important thing, is recognize procrastination is probably an emotional coping mechanism. When there is something overwhelming that you want to do, and then you don't feel like doing it, and you have this feeling of overwhelm and uncertainty and maybe anxiety, it's very difficult to unravel that and do the work that's necessary to confront that feeling. It's hard. It's very effortful. What's easier is to remove that feeling by distracting yourself with something that gives you an immediate dopamine hit. And so procrastination could be like a drug. That's essentially what how you can think about it, is that there is an emotion, there's a feeling that makes you averse to going down a certain path. And because that's effortful to work your way through that, like I've got this big assignment coming up, you procrastinate doing it, even though doing the assignment is a thing that solves the problem, that takes more effort. And the shorter path is to scroll on your phone and feel good about it. So now the feeling has been removed. The uncomfortable feeling has been removed. Procrastination is your way of coping with that feeling. The way that you overcome that is you have to understand and learn to sit with that feeling. You have to be comfortable with saying, okay, I feel this way. This is not a feeling that I have to avoid. This feeling is just part of life. This feeling is just part of what it means to pursue difficult goals and do challenging things and have fulfillment in my life. This is part of that package. And instead of trying to avoid it, understand that it's just a feeling that you can feel, acknowledge, and then work through. And separate the emotion with what you choose to do as an action. I'm not saying it's easy, but that is the more long-term solution for it. Why is it difficult to learn how to learn? A big question. In the shortest possible way, it is difficult to learn how to learn because, one, learning is mostly invisible. If I'm teaching someone how to play golf, I can just look at the way they swing and just tell them what to do. I can show them a video like, hey, it's meant to look like this, but it looks like this. You see that? So that person can gain self-awareness and insight and then make changes and then see the impact of those changes immediately. Learning to learn is difficult because most of those things happen mentally. I cannot show you how I think. I can only demonstrate and explain as much as I can. But at the end of the day, it's up to you how it's being interpreted. There's always room for error. And even then, you may not have insight into your own process. That's the reason why I did an interactive activity for the levels of processing. That's why I focused so much on how it felt for you to do that processing. Because how it feels is your way of seeing yourself do the process. Knowing how it feels to do it right, and then knowing how it feels the way you're currently doing it, that's your method of having self-awareness. And that's in itself difficult. The other thing is that for beginner learners, if you don't have guidance from someone experienced, you don't actually know whether making a change is productive or not until you test yourself. And that usually takes a week or two, or if you're lazy with testing yourself, all the way through to an exam. And so the feedback you get from making a change is very delayed. And this is the reason why I think when I coach someone, it's so much faster, is because I can tell whether the change they're making is productive or not, because I know, like, I can anticipate whether that's going to have a desirable effect or not. But if you don't have that knowledge, it's very confusing. Any change you make could be good or could be bad. And that's what it felt like for me when I was trying to improve my own learning. That's why it took me so many years, really diligently trying to improve my methods. Very slow progress, thousands of repetitions of trial and error. And that's probably the third thing, is that it just takes so long that people just give up. Like, most people give up before they see the benefits of it. And then, it's easier to change your standards and change your goal than it is to pursue through the path of trial and error until you're able to get it right. What's the biggest myth about studying that holds students back from real improvement? I think the biggest myth about studying, this is a good question. The biggest myth about studying that holds students back, I think the biggest myth is that learning has to be a certain way. Is believing that the way that they are used to learning is the way that learning should be. There are so many habits that we form about learning based on years of experience, and we get so comfortable with them that we just assume that learning must be this way. Note-taking must be this way. When I study, it has to feel a certain way, and not realizing that actually that's not true. Learning done well, and when you're really tuned into how learning should be, actually feels very different than what most people are used to. So I would say that's probably the biggest myth, and it's insidious. Like, it's really, like, it happens even to the most proactive top learners. People that I've coached for a long time that are very, very familiar with the concept. When they apply a technique and then they think, oh yeah, like, this is how it is because, like, this is the best that I can do. It's like, it's only the best that you can do because you haven't tried doing better than that before. Like, they reach that limit of discomfort and then they sort of stop there, not realizing that the next level is beyond that discomfort. Again, it's hard to explain because of the whole, invisible nature of learning thing. But I'll just say, be open-minded to what effective learning really looks like, and underrate, like, as in don't overvalue your existing habits. There are probably more changes that you can make than things you would keep the same. Okay, so this is about the I Can Study program. How often do we add updates and improvements into the program? Usually every couple of months we're updating something. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's shorter. I don't want to talk too much about the program in this because this is more just a workshop for the value thing. But yeah, it's once every couple months usually. How do you avoid perfectionism as you build a learning system? Understand that perfectionism is number one impossible, and understand that perfectionism comes from making lots of tiny imperfect changes. You can only achieve perfectionism if you know what perfectionism looks and feels like in the first place. Otherwise, you're actually just chasing a concept. And perfectionism is also probably an emotional coping mechanism. The real issue is the fear of doing something that doesn't work. Perfectionism is the way that we try to combat the fear of making a mistake. Recognize that the mistakes are your key to improvement, and the more you delay making mistakes in search of perfection, the more you delay making progress. Yeah. Have I written any research papers on study techniques? So I've written papers and book chapters and peer-reviewed sources around learning and learning principles. And I have published on some of the tools, like diagnostic tools around learning that we use. But I do not, and I actively make a decision not to publish research on study techniques for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't see myself as a researcher. I like the position I'm in right now where I get to read a lot of research, connect with researchers, understand it, and then apply it and use it in the real world and bridge it and like train people on what it is. I will never be the best researcher, but I want to be the best coach. I want to be the person that understands the research deeper than anyone that's not like the researcher and is able to understand the real world implication and the nuances of how to actually train that with people. I think for me, that is where I find a lot of value. And also, I actually really just do not like the research academia system. Like it's really slow and really, there's a lot of like politics and bureaucratic kind of things in there. Those of you that are researchers and academics, you will know this. It's like, I just personally don't enjoy that. I find it kind of, yeah, it's just very slow, and I feel sometimes unnecessary in terms of the processes. And I have mixed feelings about journals as like a business itself. So yeah. Okay. I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you for your guidance. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your feedback. And thanks for your attendance. And thanks for your support. If it wasn't for all of you guys, I would be live streaming here, talking to no one. And that would just be very sad. So thanks for giving the last 10 years of my life a productive, purposeful impact to have achieved. Can I use a system to make systems for other skills, even ones that aren't study-based? I guess that would depend on the system that you're talking about and the skill that you're talking about. Can professionals ignore low-level studying, for example, free cards or flashcards? If you don't need low-level detail and you can always have reference material, yes, you can ignore it. Unless that low-level detail helps you to understand it and how to see how it's connected. Because often low-level detail creates concreteness, but in terms of having to have that and recall it, yeah, you can actually just completely ignore it. If that's your discipline. Some professionals are in a discipline. Like medicine, you have to know the low-level detail stuff too. How do I explain things so well? Do you think this helps with learning? Well, explaining, thank you for the compliment, I guess. Explaining is a technique for retrieval that improves with your performance. That's the type of self-testing technique, and it is very valuable. So yes, teaching does help with learning. But the other reason is because I have also just been in this for a very long time. I think probably people, because of my great skincare and my great lighting, people don't realize like I have been really deeply immersed in this field for, this is my 14th year of doing this. Like, I live and breathe. I literally have dreams about learning science. Do you know what it takes to start dreaming about learning science? It's if I didn't explain things at least to this level, that would be tragic. Is Bloom's taxonomy the best way to assess one's own level of learning mastery? How can one assess study techniques based on it? Bloom's taxonomy is a great way of understanding the types of thinking processes you should use to achieve different results. And you can try to assess your own learning methods using that by being really metacognitive about your thought processes. But the best way to assess your actual mastery is through testing yourself. Your own intuition about how your mastery is likely going to be very inaccurate for years until you are really, really, really dialed in. So in almost every situation, I'd recommend always test yourself at the levels you need to test yourself at to objectively understand what your true retention and mastery level is. And you can use Bloom's taxonomy as a way to help to figure out different ways to test yourself, sure. But don't try to do it intuitively. What would be the approach to mental health improving to overcome the mental fragility of pressure and other emotions? It's a good question. It's a really broad question. I think the best way to answer this one is probably try to seek mental health professional support. And I'm not just saying that because it's a cop-out answer, but it's just that mental health is really complicated. I don't want to be sitting here giving advice about mental health when I don't understand your circumstances. But what I can say is that the best approach is the approach that allows you to make progress, do something about it. And often the best way to do something about it and make it easier is for someone to literally just tell you what to do and how to approach it. And that's why I think it's worthwhile finding a good mental health support psychologist, therapist, counselor, whoever it is. So best of luck for that. How can I learn from the videos and remember everything? What's the correct order of watching my videos? Okay, I am not even sure what the correct order of watching the videos is. In fact, I'm not even sure if the channel is set up in such a way. Here's the thing about YouTube is that when I make in order for a YouTube channel to be successful, you have to sort of make videos in a certain way, hitting certain types of topics. And one of those things is that it's really low chance of success if you make a bunch of videos sequentially basically if I tried to create a course on YouTube, that channel would fail. I'm almost 100% sure, because that's the way the algorithm works, is that it really prioritizes that specific video being able to stand alone. And a lot of learning is about other things. There's prerequisites and foundations and things that are built on top of it. So when I make videos on YouTube, I'm not trying to make videos where there is a specific order that you can just learn everything. I'm just trying to think, what are certain concepts and principles that I think are really helpful and valuable? And how do I kind of package that in a way that is going to allow it to reach the right people and as many of those people as possible? And that's kind of how we think about creating YouTube videos. It's not how I would think about, for example, creating a workshop. When I create a workshop, I'm thinking, how do I help this person achieve this objective within a certain amount of time? And then I know they're kind of sitting there committed with me for that entire flow. And so I don't even think there is an order that exists for this particular thing. I'll probably just say any order, just start somewhere and just watch whatever you think you enjoy. And you think is going to be relevant. But the most important thing is watch less, do more stuff. Okay? Just do stuff. There is enough from just this workshop where you can probably spend the next 6 to 9 months of your life just getting better at this. And you will find that your actual real world results are improving because of it. Watching more videos, more theory is actually just not going to help you. You're just going to be the person who knows exactly why they failed, which is not the position to be in. What's a good system for learning procedural information? Good question, but it's a bit too technical to go into now. Procedural information is a lot about self-testing and just testing at the right level and making sure that you are doing enough of the repetition at the different levels to stimulate the procedural requirements that you have. Okay, I think I'm going to do 2 more questions, and because we have gone like quite a lot over time, I will just end it there. But there are still over 1,000 of you just hanging on and watching, which is amazing. And again, I just thank you so much for being so interested, I guess, and just being like people that want to learn is great. It's just awesome. You know, when I first started my channel, like this community just didn't exist, and it's just crazy. So I'll just do 2 more questions. And then we'll have to wrap it up. Again, you can go to ikansai.com/1mil to get the slides and the permanent link for the recording up as well. Before I go into the final 2 questions, very quickly, can I just get a indication, how was this workshop for everyone so far? Did you like it? Did you want me to do more of these things? Did you feel it was worthwhile? I'm trying my best to provide value for you, and it's useful for me to know if this is something that is valuable for you, and I'll certainly try to do more of these in the future, not just when I hit like 5 mil or something, if that's ever going to happen. Cool, just having a look through the chat now. Okay, so overall, I'm seeing that it's great feedback. So that's good. Cool. So we'll talk with the team, and we'll see about maybe doing some more of these in the future. And again, that survey that's at that same link, ikansai.com/1mil, the survey on there, that will be really helpful for us to figure out what type of topics might we do more workshops on in the future. So again, if you would like to leave your thoughts there, I would appreciate it. All right. Thank you, everyone. 2 more questions. How do we know when we are making too many connections? Should everything be connected to everything? Yeah, this is the thing is the problem with making too many connections is that it feels overwhelming. The solution to it being overwhelming is not to make less connections, it's to group and simplify it more frequently and more often. If there are connections that exist, those connections are probably important. Like, that's teaching you about how the topic is structured. So not making connections means that you're actually choosing to not understand aspects of the topic that may actually be very important to deepening your mastery. If you think about an expert almost certainly understands those connections and can even talk about them and evaluate the importance of them. So when you feel like there's so many connections that it's getting overwhelming, probably the issue is not that you're making too many connections, it's that you're not grouping it enough. Grouping is what reduces that overwhelm by taking all of these connections and saying, okay, we're going to categorize these connections as this. And that process repeated is basically how a mind map would naturally form. Should everything be connected to everything? No, but everything could be connected to anything else, which is why you need to evaluate and think about it and see how other things are connected. If you think one thing is not connected to another thing, you still need to explore whether there might be. And often some of the most intuitive ways of understanding a topic come from seeing how things are connected that are different to how you initially thought it was connected or how it was taught to you. That's very valuable. Any tips for when you're stuck on a learning plateau? Let me just see if there's any higher rated ones. This one just says, "We love you, Justin." Thank you. Any tips for when you're stuck on a learning plateau? It's hard to give a tip if you're stuck on a learning plateau because it actually depends a lot on why you're plateauing. There are a lot of reasons why you can plateau with learning. Most of the time, it's just because you don't know what is holding you back. But in terms of figuring out what is holding you back, usually the way that I do this is like an actual consultation. We also have like other things in our program, like we've got the skills audit thing. I don't know if you're on a program. If you are, you can look at a skills audit, which kind of looks through every single skill that you're developing to see whether you're doing it correctly or not. That could be a way to see what the gap is. But yeah, it's just so contextual that it's hard to say. I might just do one more question because this one is so contextual. This is the last one for sure. Is burnout expected to happen during the journey? Burnout is something that you are always at high risk of, but it doesn't have to happen. Burnout happens when you have a high level of effort, but a low level of consistent result without control over how the effort becomes the result. You have high effort, you might do badly, that creates anxiety, frustration, stress, but because we don't know what to control, we compensate for that with more effort. That cycle that repeats, that is the burnout cycle. And in fact, actually, there's a thing. You can just Google the burnout cycle, and that's basically what it is. It's when you have effort without control over the result. So if you make sure that as you are transforming your learning and understanding about learning, you try to understand how learning works and you think about the variables and how to elicit control, then you should be able to make improvement without needing the burnout. I think burnout is a sign that the approach that you took is can be more effective, basically. Okay, we're gonna end that there. That's all the time that we've got for this particular workshop. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, attending, leaving your comments, leaving your questions, staying, even though we went almost an entire hour over time. I really appreciate all of you. I have no idea if I'll ever reach 5 million subscribers, and I'm not exactly sure when I'll do the next workshop, but it will be coming. I hope you all have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, night. Have a good day, good night, whatever you're about to go do right now. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.